And I think we are live.
I like how as we go live, I continue to adjust my shirt because that's totally what I would do. Roki, always prepared to go live right on time.
Well, hello and welcome to Lore Masters Deck live stream. We are beginning a 3 sort of live stream focused series on the Lore Mastery expansions, which I'm really excited about. These have been really fun to work on, and I've gotten to put some extra grease into the play testing over the last few weeks to sort of get them ready to demo for you, and that was really fun and rewarding. And today we're going to be doing the symbols expansion, or the emblems expansion, which actually this one was fun because Moroki's input on it has really sort of pivoted the vision of it a little bit to being something that's not just about creating literal in-world symbols, but using visual cues as a way of just thinking differently and thinking creatively about world building, which I'm really excited to try out together. But we'll get to that in the back half, because I think we're going to start by talking generally about symbols and world building and why they matter and things like that. But before we start, Moroki, can you tell the folks about what the Lore Masters deck is and maybe about how the Emblems expansion fits in?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because as you're giving me all these credits, I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, did I do that? Did I contribute to the Emblems deck in any way? There's so many things that we've been going through the creative process. And of course, I always do defer and trust your creative process a lot more than myself, but I know occasionally I just have to chime in with my opinion. And so when you said that, I was like, did I do that? Well, even if not, I'll take the credit for it. So yeah, welcome everyone to this Lore Masters deck live stream. A really quick reintroduction of ourselves. I'm Moroki Tong. I am the Story Engine's newly minted CEO, and I'm the project director. And then, of course, we have Peter Tchaikovsky, as you all probably know and love. He is the creator of the deck, and I guess overall brainchild. No, I guess brainchild is Story Engine is the brainchild of Peter. So Peter's the story, the brain manifester of the the entirety of the Story Engine deck and the deck of worlds. And of course now we have Lore Masters deck. The Lore Masters deck is I would say third release in the Story Engine family. The entire mission of the Story Engine, of course, is to help writers and writer's block and find inspiration for their creative processes. Starting with the Story Engine deck, we created a simple series of prompts that are endless to allow a writer kind of have innovation and inspiration for their stories. Deck of Worlds is more focused on world building. And now that you've built your world and now that you've built your prompt, we can flesh out the lore and craft all this rich, interconnected lore for the story. Because it's yeah, you have a character, but what drives and motivates the character? What are the characterizations around the character? How does that connect to, let's say, an organization or an entity? How does that connect to the different creatures and species and events and places that intermingle within this world? And that's what the Lore Masters deck will help you do, kind of create this web, this beautiful mind map that will flesh out and build out the world that you have initiated.
Yeah,
yes,
exactly.
I think that's the Cole's notes of that. And of course, Peter put up the link. This is obviously, we're running our crowdfunding campaign with BackerKit right now, of which if you're on YouTube or on Facebook watching it, you can always check us out at storyenginedeck.com/lore, which is where our crowdfunding campaign is. And earlier this week, we are super excited to announce that we passed the $300,000 funding mark, which means we unlock yet more cool stretch goals for you. And drum roll, I know we've been teasing it nonstop, and at some point we will unveil it all for the world to see, but we have many more stretch goals coming, and we would want you to unlock them all with us, right, Peter?
Yeah, and I think we actually hopefully will have those, if not announced, at least we'll have the graphics ready for the end of the day, and we'll be unveiling those very soon. It's been a lot of fun.
Best way to end your Friday.
Yeah, exactly. So I think let's talk a little bit then about the Emblems expansion sort of fits into Lore Masters deck in a way similar to the wild cards from the main deck. So the wild cards are these cards that you pull as you're starting new secondary prompts as a way of just sort of starting them off with like a particular detail that might help you build creatively around it. And the emblems expansion, basically, rather than starting with like a keyword, you start with a key image. And you can take this very literally, and it can be an image around, like, say, the banner of a faction or the sigil or signet ring of a character or a tattoo. Or it could be more abstract, where like you take the visual and you think about what associations you have with it, what you think it means in the context of creating an object or a location or an event. And it can be as literal or as figurative as you want it to be, but it's sort of meant to be that thing that gets the ball rolling. Um,
Mhm.
but I
And I
think,
think what I love so much about the emblems when you first described it to me is that we are incorporating a visual element. I think as writers, I mean, I don't know what everyone's writing processes are like, and of course, if you have comments on how you kind of do your own writing process and your own lore building process, please throw it in the comments because we'd love to kind of hear how everyone just sort of crafts and builds their world. I know for me, like uh I was a writer, but I also loved doodling and I loved artwork. And I think like one of the things we love to do, especially when we did the D&D campaign earlier this week, is always like like manifest our characters in a sort of visual format. I know that movie adaptations is not like everyone's jam, but I always love the idea of like that I'm kind of creating like a flesh, like in blood of the thing that I've been imagining in my head all this time, because our imagination sometimes it's like in the mind's eye, it's a little bit fuzzy. So when you put it in a visual component, it kind of like makes it a lot more tangible. And so symbols for me was always something that I loved crafting and as a way to kind of visually create something that sometimes it's hard to describe, right? In some ways, a picture is worth 1,000 words. And I may or may not, in my fiction writing days, always bought like endless books of just arcane symbols or monograms of things, or would like pick up history books on Anglo-Saxon symbols just so I could try and, I guess, like add more complexity and layers to the characters I developed.
yeah, I definitely also, for me, I got into it through Tolkien, right? Like, Tolkien
Mm,
was very, very good about having these extra visual components that really built out the lore. And I think that having visuals or symbols, whichever, whether it's like a map or it's a, the tree of Gondor is something that you actually inscribe in the book, or that you just have in the notes of the world building. I think there's something about having those symbols or having those visual elements that, like you said, number one, it makes it feel very real, right? Like you can attach the image to it. And I think that, like, Elvish writing has been the same in almost every adaptation of Tolkien, because that script communicates the fineness and delicacy of it, communicates something about the elves. It also communicates part of the history of the world, because it's similar to the Black Script of Mordor, and that's tied to the Silmarillion and the lore behind all these things. So having those visual elements makes a world that you could reimagine as a comic book, as a role-playing game, as a movie trilogy, as a television show, and every imagining of it still feels like Middle Earth, because there's these really strong visual anchors that feel consistent throughout this, Tolkien multiverse, which is essentially what we have.
mhm.
And I think it's a testament to the power the visuals have in world building, and that sometimes just something as specific as a glyph, or like Gandalf's character that he signs his notes with, those become anchors that really help something feel real, and it becomes a great pivot foot for, as your story moves to different places, it still feels real or anchored through these consistent elements. The other thing that I think that's really cool about that, this has been my favorite thing. This is there is a lore fragments expansion for Deck of Worlds, which is not related to Lore Masters deck. You can use them together actually very easily, but essentially it's almost a little standalone expansion that just, you come up with a prompt for a type of physical document or art piece or something that would exist in the world. It might be a transcript. It might be like a page from a textbook. It might be a daily prayer, someone says, but it's a piece of in-world lore that it prompts you for. And then there's another card type called the flourish, where it prompts you for just a little something extra stylistically about what might make this piece unique. And the thing that drove me in creating that deck is the same thing that I think got me really excited about the Emblems deck, which is that it creates these in-world lore pieces that, and this is going to sound very high cerebral, so I'll explain it after, but they synchronize our experience as readers with the experience of the characters in the book. By that I mean, when I see the map to Smaug's lair at the beginning of The Hobbit, when I see that map drawn out, I'm looking at the same map that Bilbo is. There is no difference between the map that Bilbo sees and I see. We are synchronized. We are seeing the world through this almost the same set of eyes. And I think there is something that is like powerful, nigh magical about having that level of connection where those barriers in the fiction, the suspension of disbelief between you and the character vanish, and for a moment you are seeing things the same way. I love
Mhm.
that. I think it's like utter magic. I get so excited
I've
when
never even thought about it that way before. I remember when maybe I was a terrible map reader, but when I used to see the maps show up on any sort of fantasy book, I felt like my brain would freeze and I'd be like, oh my God, I'm gonna have to learn this map and I'm totally gonna forget where everything is and I'm gonna like journey and then get lost. And this is so complicated. But I've never considered for a moment that it actually closes the gap between me and the characters of the world because they too are using the same equipment that we are using. And I think that's actually gonna I think like maybe for you it was the map. For me, I know sometimes at the start of chapters of certain books I read, they would have a small illustration. You know what, I don't know what I would call it, like maybe the chapter was called the witch's box and they would have like a little box drawn, or they would sometimes illustrate a character just so that you could have a visual reference. And I think for me it was probably a similar experience in that it closed the gap between how you experience the world as the reader or experiencing the world through the eyes of the characters. Because if you see that character drawn, or if you see that box or that prop or that costume illustrated, you're like, oh, this is what the characters are seeing, and it helps ground you deeper in that universe. And I'm gonna have to I'm gonna have to go back to the books that I used to read with maps and just look at it with new eyes. I really enjoyed how you shared how you and explained that to people.
well, I think there's definitely there's that sense of immersion where for a minute, really uh, the things that make us feel like our eyes are not fully in the world, like where we can see the VR headset that we're wearing that lets us imagine this place. For a second, all of those that periphery goes away, and you just see exactly what it's
Mhm.
supposed to be, and it's outrageously cool. But in terms of and so this is pivoting, I guess, from talking about visuals more generally to talking about symbols. Do you have any favorite symbols from fiction, like a symbol that, like, when you imagine it, it still means something to you, or that it like reminds you very strongly of that fictional world?
Oh dang. Do you ever have that moment when people ask you what's a good place to eat, and and you will have hundreds of restaurants in your
100%.
brain archive, and then the moment they ask you, you're like, I have no idea. And then like 2 minutes after this live stream ends, I'm gonna be like, dang, I really wish I brought up that very specific like symbol that meant so much to me. Uh so as I rack my memory banks for that symbol, I want you to tell me what your favorite symbol is, and if any of you in the audience have any thoughts on what, whether there is like a visual symbol in the fiction you've read, or even the ones you've created that you would want to share, please do so. But I'm going to throw this back to you, Peter, for just like 2 seconds while
Yeah, of
I like
course.
crank open my little Jack in the Box of
Yeah.
memories.
Yeah, so yeah, I'd love to see your in the comments like favorite symbols that you have from fiction, and also if you have any questions for us about world building with symbols,
Yes.
about glyphs and other like visual representations or visual world building, let us know, because we're gonna get through all those topics before we do the demo of the expansion. But we'd love to like know specifically what things you have questions about. Um, yeah, definitely as a Tolkien guy, like I am really attached to both the Dwarvish script and the Elvish script. The Dwarvish script is actually just like almost exactly like a few differences from different Futhark and Anglo-Saxon alphabets, but it was one of my first times of like realizing that when you look at that map at the beginning of The Hobbit, you can actually like learn what the characters represent, and you can decode it. Like it's that map actually has that message about like going at the thrush or the lark sound or something, and three can walk abreast. Like it's written there in secret code, but you can learn the code because it's consistent and real. So that was a really big one for me. Learning that it was tied to a real world runic system was very exciting too. And then I never learned Elvish, but I definitely got excited. Just like the shape of the characters is a big one. Um, I love the white tree of Gondor. I think that's an image that like anytime I see it, I just get very excited because it says something about a shared value or a shared universe that me and a total stranger might be able to connect through. Like even though we've never met each other, we have this thing in common. And the same thing where like Harry Potter is not like my particular cup of tea. But I've seen people who have the Deathly Hallows thing, and that's something that they just as a way of saying like this is a thing that I care about. And I do like that these in-world symbols can become little rallying places for worlds that we're attached to, or like fictional factions or characters that we're attached to that have this thing. I know for you,
Mhm.
I wonder, like, is the Transformers symbol something that exists in the world of Transformers, or does it only exist in our world as a way of representing Transformers?
No, it does because that's it's technically their factions, right? So like the one that everyone knows with like the soft face, like the kind of more robotic face was is Autobots, and then the one that's more pointed and usually purple is Decepticon. So they wore the symbols as their literal faction. So if you were an Autobot, you wore the like red symbol with the more kind of friendly eyes, and then the more pointed symbol Decepticons were like a complete other faction. So it was a way for them to kind of show which side they were on. I guess it was just like I guess it's sort of like the imperial symbol and the rebel symbol, right? You wore that
Yeah.
symbol to represent the faction that you were part of. So it's the more I was thinking about it, I remember one that fascinated me a lot as a kid. It's actually one that's grounded in the real world was Morse code.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I was really fascinated with Morse code and how people used it as a form of communication. And I remember when I was really young, and I maybe symbols for me has a very different representation because English is my second language, and so for a long time, like I probably gravitated to all symbols as a way to help me relate to fiction or relate to storytelling when I was literally not understanding what was happening on a screen, right? Like sometimes I wouldn't understand what's happening on the screen, so therefore what looking at symbols helped me really quickly realize, oh, these are like the bad guys or these are the good guys. So for me, they were a form of translation. And when I was really young, I got a little sheet of Morse code, and like it was almost and it was such a fascinating thing to me because I just simply did not understand at the time that like the dot line dot was something that was used for like audio. I was thinking that, oh, this is how you learn how to like spell things, and that's obviously not really the case. I mean, you do, but instead you're listening to it and then you're translating it to words. And then as I grew older and visited museums, and they would kind of have those reenactments where they play Morse code out, I'm like, my God, like someone has to hear this and immediately be able to jot and translate. Like it's like learning a whole other language. And so for me, like I don't know if that's necessarily symbols per se, but it was very language representative. And maybe for me, the other reason why symbols has a different representation to me is because Chinese inherently is
Mm,
evolved from symbols, right? Like
yeah.
the
Ideograms. Yeah.
right, like yeah, like the fire written in Chinese, which is the same as kanji. It's actually they're both written in the Chinese symbols. Is like two dots with this kind of um connection in the middle, and it actually was meant to be fire at one point. And if you go back and look at like very ancient Chinese languages, it was a lot more based on images that eventually became words. So uh I think that's for me like my deepest connection to symbols, and in some ways I have a very strange removal to symbols in some ways. Like for me, I like see them and I love playing around with them, but I don't hold them super sacred either, if that makes any sense. Like I definitely had a bad habit when I was creating my own fictional worlds to just like grab images. I was like, oh, that's cute. And I draw it, and like maybe someone else later on might point out, like, do you know that the eye actually represents this, or the upside down triangle means this, or the star? And I'm like, oh shit, I never actually knew that because I don't necessarily have the cultural background for that, given that a lot of it's already secondary or even tertiary to me.
Yeah, but what I love about that is, symbols are containers for meaning, right? Like the eye can mean a bunch of different things in a bunch of different contexts, and the way that it's drawn, the stylization of it can mean different things. Maybe it means sight, maybe it means blindness, maybe it means vigilance. Like I love that because visuals do not have definitions, right? Like there are like books where you can look up different symbolic meanings of things in general, but there's no strict definition dictionary type collection of what symbols mean. So as a basis for prompts, they leave you with so many more places you can go, because you're not just like, here are the four things that this word might mean in different contexts. It's like this could mean whatever you want it to and whatever you can imagine it to. And that's exciting. That's why I love that you can take those things, and maybe they do have other coded meanings that people are going to bring from the real world, but you can also inject new meanings. You could find but you could pull meanings from other cultures have of those symbols. I think it's tremendously exciting, and especially for Morse code, I think it's such a great example because symbols are by definition visual. There's a way to render them in space that the eyes can see, but symbols can evoke other senses, right?
Mhm.
Morse code can be translated in an auditory way. It can be not done just as symbols, but it can be done as a series of flashes, so like visual blinks and the spaces between blinks. Um, Morse code translates across different senses, and like you it might be that like when you see your favorite beer's logo, you smell it, right? Like you start to have these associations, and humans as a species are very visually driven creatures. Our visual system is by far the most advanced of the five senses, and it becomes a very strong hook for memory and association, right? There's a reason that companies all have logos, and it's because that visual hook is something um, that people connect to instinctively. And you can it's the reason that branding works, is because we live with visual systems, or many of us do have visual systems as a dominant way of communicating or interacting with the world.
It
So
can also show how symbols actually, when we were talking about different cultures and how people bring their cultural meanings, it also can show how symbols can be misrepresented, which is an interesting thing you could use in fiction as well, right? Like maybe the symbol, right, like of like let's say there's a vertical line with lines across it, maybe evokes a very certain thing for one thing, and a character could interpret it this way, and then all along it actually meant something completely different. That's something that often is used in the world of fantasy, that someone interpreted something this way because they think like, oh, it's supposed to indicate the world ending, but really all along it's supposed to be the world beginning, right? Which I
yeah,
think
yeah,
was a really
or you can do
interesting
that
point.
thing that I love writing about fantasy languages. Where actually a great example I think was in the live play that we did on Wednesday. And for those who missed it, on last Friday we created a setting using the Lore Masters deck during a live stream, and then on Wednesday we had a party of 4 players play through like we actually did a full D&D performance of exploring this world that you helped us create, the world of Rhymeway on a glacier. And one of the ways that I described a location, also an artifact called the Hearth of the World, was that the ancient language that was used to describe its function um, used a verb that's often translated to mean craft, but which could also be translated to mean wish, to make physical or to give physical shape to something non-physical. And I love moments where you get to write in such a way where you think about the way that language works and you apply that to a fictional language. You can invent etymologies, you can invent secondary meanings, and symbols are so ripe for that kind of storytelling. Like exactly what you said about a character might misinterpret a symbol, or um, a character might take a symbol and decide to apply a meaning to it. Like maybe their sub faction, their splinter faction, takes the eye symbol that was originally part of it and like gouges it out. And this is like this is the faction
Ooh.
that is the gouged eye. This is the faction that thinks that now that we have been struck at, we must become harsher. We must be ready to fight back or something. And that's the way they symbolize that. Like you can layer symbols, you can combine them. They're just it becomes a really wonderful playground. And actually, the give me a moment here. I'm going to pull up the cover of the expansion because
Yeah.
this one has a story behind it that I think actually, and the it was our graphic designer Zach, who works with me on a lot of the graphics for the decks. Shout out to Zach Schuster, who suggested this as the cover. And it's funny because he pulled an image that I wrote the image brief for when I was writing for the tabletop RPG Emberwind, which is where we licensed the image from for the expansion. So he chose it, but it was an image that I'd created 3 years ago, and it encapsulates exactly what I want to have happen with the Emblems deck. So this was not something that I planned to do, but I do want to pull it up because I think it's really evocative
It's
here.
all
And
about visuals. Emblem is all about
it's
visuals.
all about
So
visuals,
there we go.
exactly. Um, and I'll just need a moment. I'm just going to pull up the actual original illustrations rather than the cover illustration. While I am pulling up the file, yeah, I guess, are there any other, while we're talking about language systems, are there any other language systems that you've seen written or represented in fiction or in movies or adaptations that you have found like that's cool? And what is it about it that makes it effective?
I one of the other ones that I was sort of thinking about, one of the first Miyazaki movies I ever watched was Laputa. I was two. It was probably two, like I was like 2 years old, 3 years old, and it was in Chinese. And it probably was not the film that you should ever show a 2 year old, 3 year old, because it's quite an intense film. It is definitely not My Neighbor Totoro. But I think like one of it was sort of you like not so obviously Shita wore this necklace that was like a stone that was connected to Laputa itself, and it had a very distinct symbol on it, and uh, that symbol was sort of interconnected with her home world and sort of this like ancient world and language. And then eventually when you get to Laputa itself, there is like they kind of allude that there's a different language throughout the entire movie. You don't actually see it, but they speak it. They speak spells, but when they get on it, then there's like these, you know, big boards and plates that show up, and you don't actually really get a chance to see the language on it because it's not really the important part. But I think part of what I remember was that when the villain Muska like takes the necklace and he's sort of using it as like a reader, as a translator, so it was almost like a key, and it was like I had that tie-in throughout the entire movie that at first it was just here's just a representation of this world where she comes from, but later on it becomes this like really significant key that can help people unlock a lot of the secrets in the world.
I love that. I love world building that leaves Easter eggs for people to unpack themselves. That leaves them some work to do on their own to decide, or to look things up and look deeper and find those secrets. Quick little shout out here. Tara says that Skull and Crossbones / Jolly Rogers is the best symbol. I
It's
definitely love it.
true.
I think it's an example of something that like the moment you see it, you know what it means, right? And then any symbol that's proximal to that has crossed bones or that has a skull is going to evoke a little bit of pirate imagery. So you can use that as like a part of the palette of whatever visual you're building.
Yeah, I mean, if you really think about it, like symbols, or at least the way symbols is in used in fiction is some sort of like branding, right? Like that's the business person in me talking here, but like it is very much branding because like it's a blessing and a curse because in some ways the skull and crossbones probably will be never seen in any other way than piracy or poison, I guess. But or similar to like the the comedy tragedy mass, as Eric, who's our community manager, is kind of managing our socials and comments today. Comedy tragedy mass in theater, they evoke a very, very specific thing. It's hard to kind of move away from that, obviously, forever. Like if you see kind of the upside down pentagram, it'll probably always evoke the exact same meaning forevermore. But it's also very powerful, right? Or actually, when we were talking about misrepresented symbols earlier, I was thinking about the freaking D from Disney. Everyone, like, I remember there's like literally, I remember seeing a Facebook group or a Facebook page that was like, literally, it's like, did we all like only just learn in our adulthood that the D in Disney is actually a D and not some like really weird G swirly creation treble clef nonsense?
Well, actually, and I think the Disney logo is another example of one of those things where I hear the dee dee doo dee when I see it. That sound comes unbidden to my mind. And another example again,
Right.
I think of like anchored in the senses, the way that we mix our senses together. And a vote for fictional language in Arrival, thinking about language and alien structures.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there's so many of them from like Arrival, Bionicle, Seven Kenning, lots of stuff.
but I'll talk a little bit about Emberwind for a moment here.
Yes.
So this was a character that I wrote for a campaign called The Song Weave Tapestry that Eric, our community manager, co-wrote with me, along with Caleb, who joined us on that project. And you can find Emberwind at emberwindgame.com if you want to check it out. But this is a character named Cecil or Cecil, who belonged to a religious order called the Corabilis, who found increasingly that what the order was focusing on, rather than doing good work or helping people, was like debating philosophy, debating the limits of what religion should and shouldn't do, and rather than living principles, they were like debating and discussing principles. And there's a moment in his backstory before the campaign begins where he literally wrenches the symbol of the Corabilis out of his staff, and you can see. I'll zoom in a little bit here. You can see the like damaged headpiece here. Which almost takes on the shape of the actual original symbol. But it
Oh,
becomes
was that deliberate?
no, but the effect of it is that it becomes this crooked, like he's leaving the main path, he's doing his own version of the same thing, which I loved, and that was phenomenal. And it's a moment where he's like ripping it out and throwing it on the ground and leaves without it. And his character sheet has like there's special properties attached to his staff that you can use in the storyline because it is the like broken staff, the centered icon. And for Emberwind is its own tabletop RPG system. It's a lot of fun. It's really well balanced, really kinetic combats, really worth checking out. we associate characters like this with, say, like the cleric in Dungeons and Dragons, where like the holy symbol is how they cast their magic, and like his is intentionally destroyed. So what does it mean to have that cleric who's on a corrupted path of their own choosing, but is still living their principles? I had so much fun with that. And then so when Zach pulled this image out to suggest it as we call Cecil Sexy Jesus. That's our behind the scenes name to which we refer to him. When he pulled out Sexy Jesus and put him on the cover, I'm like, that's it. That's perfect. That is everything that I
You know, and
wanted
if you
to
call
do.
him Sexy Jesus too, there's some religious like etymology, like symbol in there too. It's like, I mean, I know it's not, but it's like we call him Sexy Jesus. We just add some religious symbols in there as well. And I think I think now that you describe it, like it makes so much more sense to me, because obviously there's a little bit of inside joke there to Emberwyn for sure, that the fact that the symbol is represented in the piece that he's pulling out, it's represented in sort of the banners that are behind him. It shows how symbols can be carried out through the other things. I figured I'd bring this one up. This one just like crackled through my mind as you were describing Cecil. Sailor frickin' Moon, and the symbols they always had, because they're using symbols that actually are rooted in existing icons for planets, but they kind of like used and transformed them into these kind of very magical-ish symbols for each of the Sailor Scouts, right? It was like represented in how their transformations. It had a bit of magic. It kind of added a bit of whimsy to it. They altered the symbols probably just slightly. I'm not sure if like, I think they did where they like sometimes maybe made a heart instead of a circle, just to kind of like tweak it. And the idea of tweaking existing symbols and kind of crafting something extremely new with it is very powerful as well.
Yeah, and I think that for the emblems deck, and I think we'll crack it out just about now. The thing about the emblems deck is that yeah, you can use as much of the symbol or as little of the symbol as you want. So if you want that to be literally the visual that you have in mind, great. If you want to use that as a starting point for drawing a different visual or thinking about a different visual, or just like again saying like that shape, that ambiguous shape looks like this to me, and that's what this makes me think of, and that's an association I'm going to attach to the character, then that works great too. So really it is about use as much or as little of the prompt as you want, more so than any of our other decks.
Absolutely. And I like how Eric here is saying the emoji may be the ultimate language symbols of the modern era, which I think is really true. I'm surprised that neither of us thought about it or brought it up.
Yeah, no, like if you did not know the cultural context, an eggplant would just look like vegetables, right?
Yeah, an eggplant is just vegetables, and the little water spray is totally just about like getting sprayed by water.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Very important.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, I think we should do some world building with some symbols. So I'm going to start us off with a faction. The challenge that I have anticipated with this demo is that normally I read you the cues and you just write out what the cue is. Now we have to agree on what the symbol is, and there are abstract symbols intentionally included on every single one of the cards. So I will try to name. I would try to give the symbol a name for the purposes of being able to tally votes, because I want you all to be able to vote on which symbol we use. So that'll be a unique challenge. We're gonna have to feel our way through it here. Let's get started. So I'm gonna bring in our demo cam. And we are going to...
And for just as a little, while you're bringing up the demo cam, and Eric, you can probably either find a link for the add-ons or the different pledge levels. For the Lore Masters deck, obviously you can buy the single Lore Masters deck, and I think we actually have a pledge level where if you're only really at looking at exploring just one expansion for now. Oh, maybe we removed that. No, we didn't. If you're looking at just adding like one expansion versus all three, because we have 3 lore mastery expansions overall. Obviously today we're showing the emblems one. We have one for deities, which is coming. I haven't put up the graphic yet, guys. I'm sorry, I just finished it yesterday, but if you guys want the kind of the early bird lead on the schedule, our next demo is on this coming Tuesday, I believe. Our next live stream is going to be Tuesday, July 11th at 2:30, where we're going to be speaking about our next expansion, which is the Deities expansion, Master of Gods, which I think is a pretty like rockin' name. Yeah. And then on the next Wednesday at 11 a.m., we will be exploring the Namesakes expansion, and then we'll be following up with the Bridges on Friday that week. So that schedule will be coming out soon, but if joining us to kind of explore and demo the expansions is in your bag of things that you want to learn about the deck, mark your calendars off, and I'll get that up later on today as well. But yes, if you're looking at just, we do have options in our pledge levels where you can just get the Lore Masters deck with one expansion. You can get all three. You can get just the bridges, or you can get the whole kit and caboodle. So it kind of depends on how wet do you want your feet? Do you want your toes just wet, or do you want to like go up to the knees and the thighs and shiver a little bit because the water's really cold? And then you dive past the waist and you get like fully up to your neck and you're like fully immersed in, and then you realize you're actually very warm after all. That was a very strange experience. That this is Muroki's creative brain just goes like way off the, God, I don't want to say it, the deep end. Since we're talking about waters, that's my bad pun. That's like, you guys have all been, this is the influence you've all been having on me. I'm beginning to make puns that are really bad and like largely probably not understood by most people.
Whatever. We will convert you to puns yet. And yeah, one other quick note. This particular time slot is when a laser beam of light, very much like in the scene from Raiders of the Lost Ark where they discovered the location of the tomb, a laser beam of light comes in and starts crossing my desk. So we're going to have some very dramatic lighting for this. And I will also physically be melting down as the I close off myself from the room that is the air conditioner in it when I do these, so I will be visibly melting as this goes on. But good question from
Peter. Steve, before we get started, yes, question from Tara. That was exactly what I was eyeing up as well, asking for each of us, which is our favorite expansion and why?
That's a really hard one for me. It really depends on which creative mode I'm in. There are modes where I love where like I'm hooked into the visual storytelling, and that's the like Emblems Expansion is exactly what I need. But the Deities expansions is also one that I keep coming back to again and again and again, because there's something almost image-like about like having we're not supposed to. No, I can't unveil it early. There's something about it being like the Watcher, the Monarch, as like these deity archetypes that something about it that is very evocative and powerful. And I love that. But then I start playing with namesakes, and like namesakes were, I think, probably my favorite card type from Deck of Worlds. And getting to have that same magic happen for not just locations but anything has been phenomenal fun. So yeah, I'm gonna cop out and say it's all of them.
I know, I was gonna be like, and Peter's answer is everything. That counts as one, right? If you say everything, it's like one.
Yeah. And even like the bridges too, like the recombinability you get when you have the decks properly talking to each other in a structured way is like ridiculous. It's I refuse to answer.
Well, I'll give everyone an answer, and it's actually a singular answer, which is the deities. And I think I have a bit of a bias. I think out of all the expansions, I might have had the most input in the deities deck. And I remember this is like one of those you're gonna get some little random behind the scenes stuff about Peter and I. So like I had opinions before about even doing expansions. I had this like really big vision that the Lore Masters deck would be this incredibly self-contained unit, and I was like, no expansions necessary. And then Peter sort of convinced me that expansions were necessary because there were these things that were just to force them into the main deck wouldn't make sense, and they needed an opportunity to exist on their own. And when I was speaking about the deities, I think one thing that excited me about the deities, and like I don't want to bury the lead too much, you probably should find out more about the deities deck. What you should do is join us Tuesday at 2:30 p.m. 7 p.m. my time, because I actually will be in another country. But you should be joining us at Tuesday to learn more about the deities deck and why Muroki likes the deities deck so much. But let's just say that there's something about like or hate the movie, and I'll say I didn't think the movie was great, but like there's some like, let's just say there's some like characters and beings when I watched Eternals, the Marvel's Eternals movie, that evoked something in me in the way I think a lot of us are beginning to explore and question our universes that resonate for me for the deities deck. And that's all I will say on the matter for now. For the rest of it, join us Tuesday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern time.
Yeah. And you can sign up to be notified when we go live on YouTube. So if you're watching this on our BackerKit page, you can click through to our YouTube channel, hit the live thing, and you can hit notify me for every single one of those streams that we have coming up. The next set of expansion streams are all queued up there with their timestamps. So if you hit...
and if I was a smart human, I would also be like sending out updates and adding things to the discussion board and sending emails to everyone. But I didn't
Folks know where
today.
to
I'm
find
sorry,
us.
Peter.
Folks know where to find us. And all of our live streams are up for posterity, so you can see any streams you missed are also on that live tab. So you can sign up for the new ones and you can rewatch the old ones. In particular, the one that we just did on Wednesday, the live play in the setting was an absolute storytelling high for me. I've never gotten to do a live play like that. I've always wanted to, and the players, I cannot say enough about how good the players did. The climax that we reached in storytelling, something that I wrote the adventure, right? Like I wrote it based on
Yeah.
material that I created with all of you, and I did not predict the way that it was going to go. There was a bunch of deeks at the end that just led to something so cool and fun. If you're a fan of actual plays or live plays, I really think that the
I think you should
Nam was
quickly
my
share the.
favorite.
Yeah, I
It's
think you
Hiroki's
should.
character.
Oh, thank you. I feel so touched. I'm very excited for the potential fan fiction that could come out for Nam. I really enjoyed creating her and getting my like very first foray in the D&D world, and I think Peter should take like a brief moment. I know we keep like we keep like sidetracking. This is what happens when you get like creatives into a room. We're just like, look at all the other things that we want to talk about outside of like the main thing for our thing. But I think you should take 3 seconds to post that screenshot that you took of you and Jazz.
I'm gonna
Because
save that for the end.
oh,
Remind me at the
okay,
end.
okay.
That'll be the last thing that I go out showing. There's a very special screenshot of this is my wife's first time. She's a very private person. She very rarely comes into like public things. So a lot of people have heard me talk about her, but never met her. And so for her to come on and play live as a performer was so good. And there was a moment where she critted on the big bad evil guy on the first turn of combat in the big fight at the end. Critted on him with like a two-handed halberd with a raging barbarian, and there's a moment of simultaneous admiration and what the hell do I do? That like I caught the screenshot of my reaction to like this is so wonderful, but oh no, this combat is about to go off the rails. That I'll share with you at
It
the end.
was
It was a really
brilliant. It
wonderful
was
moment. It meant a
brilliant.
lot to me. Let's create a faction, friends.
Let's create a faction.
So here we go. We are going to create. It's either going to be a club, a battalion, a country, or a house. And in this sense, it's the house like House Usher from Edgar Allan Poe or House Stark. That is how I envision that. But also, it can mean whatever you want. So we'll go ahead and vote for club, battalion, country, or house. Any of these tickling your fancy, Maruki?
I'm just more kind of like feeling the intense difference that calling something a country versus like a country so big in comparison to a club or a battalion or a house that I'm like, dang, like it has a very different vibe, and looks like a lot of people are agree because they're all chiming in with country here. I think country's already.
Yeah, we have not done something on that scope yet. Like all of our factions.
Yeah, it's very
so
macro, right?
Yeah.
It's incredibly macro. Actually, I have like this one fantasy. It's not a trilogy. Is there an official word for like a 4-book series? I don't actually know.
Quadrilogy, I think.
Is it actually
a mouthful,
quadrilogy?
though. Yeah,
Okay. Yeah, but I'm pretentious that way, and I would totally want to like call something that's not a trilogy. So that's probably one of the reasons why. But this quadrilogy that I will maybe publish before I die. That's kind of like the I would say, like, you know how everyone has like that baby that you don't really know how to ever publish or like ever finish.
Yeah.
That's the one, and I know that one I built like a lot of countries, and I would just get so worked up with trying to figure out the intricacies of like the politics and making sure that it wasn't just so broad scope that it's like, no, you shouldn't have like politics or things that just encompass like whole continents, right? Like our world doesn't function that way. We need to be more concise and precise. And actually, I'm going to take this moment to kind of throw some shade at Rowling, because I feel like that she has become like the punchline of a lot of my shade, and I'm happy to keep slinging it at her. But like I remember at one point she did her like world building for the rest of the world of Harry Potter and showing where the schools were lumped in together. It showed that the one part of Asia, the school was like North Korea and Japan. Like it encompassed all of Korea and all of Japan. And I think someone made a meme that's like, the moment you realize that like North Korea and Japan are like going to the same wizard school, and like the eyes of everyone being like oh no, like absolutely not. Someone should have done their research a little bit better. All right, we picked country.
We picked country. So here we go. So normally when you're building a lore prompt, you will pull 4 different secondary cues of the same type. So we'll pull more faction cards and we'll use the backside of them because every card is double-sided. So normally we'd pull 4 more cues and use the backsides. But because we want to get right into emblem creation, we are going to go ahead and pick a wild card right off the bat. Normally you'd only pull the wild card as you expand new prompts off of it, but I'm eager to get started. I'm eager to dive in. So we're going to break the rules a little bit here. And we're going to pull an emblem. So here's your first look at an emblem card. So you can go ahead and vote for scales. And in case you can't see, it's actually a little hand holding them up. A little bit of detail there. You can vote for, let's call it bonsai or tree. You can vote for triangle, which also has like a little triangle texture. You can vote for, let's just call it H, I think, for now. You can vote for fish. You can vote for hand. And if you look close, the hand has a little bit of submarkings in it. You can vote for, we'll call that spiral.
Lollipop.
I also see kind of a lens or a lollipop. And that's what, again, this is what I like. Like I was very inspired by the Codenames Images expansion or variant, where rather than it being words, it's images, these like very abstract images that combine things. I thought it was a lot of fun. And then this we will call, let's call that A. We'll call it A. And so we'll get some votes in. And if you want to propose what you see about that symbol that you like and want to work with, you can let me know. I like forest dew here. I'm digging the bonsai. And yeah, this is very Rorschach. Yeah, it's very much what do you see?
But I think that matters because like we all take interpretations from a symbol, and I think even when we read fiction, we all I mean, as we've indicated right at the start of live, we all interpret symbols very, very differently. And it's actually interesting because I think like as a result, sometimes it allows us to either immediately believe the scene that we're being provided, or we will resist it forever and ever and ever and ever.
Yeah, yeah. All right, let's tally up here. We got bonsai, triangle, bonsai, and spiral. And Eric sees a pretty flower, but I think that's 2 for bonsai. So I think we're doing bonsai. So the bonsai. So I can definitely imagine this being the symbol of the country, like just straight up that they're like, it's interesting. It's like you hear about like the Beast Nation. Like I think that Forrest Dew, I believe, was talking about an author whose world building involves different animal-based nations, but like plant nations would be really interesting too. So and it can be bonsai specific, where it's like a kind of like plant growing as an activity. It could be more general to just types of trees. I kind of like the idea of like just this symbol, this being on the flag of the country is something about growth, that it's like symbolic of growth. This could be like a specific tree that we could actually pull out and turn into like a creature card. There's so many different ways that we can do this. So I guess, does anyone have any, well, let's not decide yet. Let's pull some more secondary cues, and maybe a meaning will take shape around that. But for now, I really like this as a starting point. Ooh, great pitch here from Fellowship of the Tables. A depiction of a past leader of a nation of tree people. Actually, one thing that can be really fun, you don't have to decide yourself as a world builder. You can like pull that out as a twist later, where like you reveal the origins, or the origins are mistaken, or there's just competing theories. Also vote for cultivation. But let's pick out some more secondary traits here. So we've got that this country has a background where they had an embarrassing scandal. Oh, imagine they put this tree on their flag and then someone kills it.
Oh my god.
Maroki is a very, very good plant doctor, and I think proud plant parent. So imagine that like you like got your favorite plant tattooed on you, and then it dies like the next week, and you're like, well, this is forever now.
I have real stories about this. Are you trying to like trigger my PTSD over my cactus dying, Peter? Are you trying to hurt me?
I am not. I promise that I'm not trying to bring fresh grief for an old cactus.
No tattoos to embarrass me, though.
A cactus nation would be fun. A cactus nation. An agenda where they want to defeat another faction. A trait where they're seen as having in-group social status, which in the sense of a nation is really interesting, because that's like the nation that people want to get into, and maybe they aren't allowed to, or there's like specific policies that prevent people from immigrating there. And then a trait where the country is staunch traditionalists. And A note that I'm going to sort of, or a suggestion that I'm going to pull from the Culture Keyholes expansion for Deck of Worlds. Culture Keyholes expansion is a expansion full of questions that you can ask about a particular area and the people who live there. And there's something in the guidebook that suggests that the question might be like, how do they remember their dead? And then you'll use that as a prompt for thinking about this culture in greater detail. Thing A, you can use the Culture Keyholes expansion with Lore Master's deck. You can layer that on top and ask questions about factions and things like that, and it works really well. Same thing for locations. Another cool thing about it is that the guidebook has a little suggestion where anytime you are dealing with something with a large group of people, especially like at the level of a country or a province or a region, to think about the people who would give a different answer to this question, which is to say that no country is a monolith, right? Like there's not going to be a country where everybody is a staunch traditionalist. But if they have that as a reputation, or if it is like they tend to be more traditional, but there's still, I always recommend thinking about the diversity of people within a country or within a larger group of that size, and make sure that you think about and represent that. Because it's very, very rare. You know, we have actual cues that are literally about hive minds in this deck, but most things are not a hive mind, and in most cases, there's individuality within a group. So yeah, let's go ahead and get votes for Embarrassing Scandal, agenda to defeat another faction, a trait where they're seen as having in-group social status, or a trait where they are staunch traditionalists. Maruki, do you want to make any pitches for what you'd like to see in the votes?
I think the scandal is hilarious.
I am also really into the scandal.
And the way you pitched it too, that was just like, yes, it was about the, like, they had their tree and their trees like just got like murked. And murked in like the worst way. Like, I don't know, like someone accidentally drove their car into it the other day or something, or they overwatered it.
Yeah,
Fellowship of the Tables is looking at wanting to defeat another faction because they want to see a symbol for another faction. So we're already having some Autobots versus Decepticon energy starting here.
Well, this is ripe for a corner tuck. We could go ahead and use both here. And for those who haven't joined us on a previous live stream with a corner tuck, corner tucking is like an advanced mechanic for the Lore Masters deck, where if you have two cues and you like both of them on a secondary card here, and they're next to each other, you can just tuck it so that they're on a corner together, and you use both of them. And this is a nice way to like have your cake and eat it too. When you do this, you just skip the next card draw. So we're only going to draw one more card to finish off this prompt.
So many endless possibilities. I'm trying to remember how many we have. Like over 2,000 cues on this new deck.
Yeah,
right?
I think it's 20. I think it's going to be 2,400 when we hit the 300 cards unlocked. So it's already well over 2,000, and I think we're in 2,400. And like for comparison point, I'm pretty sure Story Engine's in the 700s, and Deck of Worlds is about the same. So this is like considerably. It's like both those decks together and another deck on top of it, more or less. So it's super.
A lot of cues, and that's just cues. So that's not even like all the like different possibilities that you can put it all together for as well.
I have not been able to figure out for Story Engine. I have a little spreadsheet where I can calculate using the basic story format, like how many different combinations are there. And for the main deck, it's I think 32 billion, or maybe it's 12 billion. It's 32 when you add expansions, but it's a lot. It's a lot. I actually don't know
more than enough for our lifetime, probably.
Yeah,
more than our lifetime. I'm pretty sure there was like, I remember years ago when I was studying science or math and numbers, and people said like, how long would it take to actually count like to a billion? I think it was like a little kitty storybook or something. It was like showing like if you actually tried to count like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and actually count to a billion, you'd basically be dead. Yeah. Like you wouldn't make it. More than enough to last an entire lifetime. And now we're adding over 2,400 cues. And I believe our stretch goal is hitting 350,000. We will basically that's the whole deck. That's the whole goal that we have for the deck, the whole kit and caboodle. So if you guys are loving what Lore Masters deck can possibly do for your creativity, whether it is for writing stories, building settings for Dungeons and Dragons or other TTRPG games, using it as a way for like education or for schools or for even just enjoyment, just like a way to stimulate your creativity, like building a puzzle. Please do share our crowdfunding campaign with your friends, your family, your anyone who you think would benefit from it in some way, shape, or form. We really, really appreciate all the support that you guys have given us so far. Like honestly, it is the community that makes the Story Engine what it is. Like all of it, honestly.
100%. We are very faction driven. The fact that we have a group behind us has been like, it's meant everything to us. But let's finish off our little faction here. So what I've got is that they are linked to a conspiracy about an event. They have an agenda to unleash a monster on the world. That they have a trait where they worship a specific aspect or avatar of a deity, or a trait where they are run by a council. So go ahead and vote for conspiracy, monster, worship, or council.
And as the votes are coming in, Tara's just saying that her mom is excited to play the Lore Master deck and showed her a demo and wants to build the lore with her good family. I mean, it's true. Like that's actually how I got inspired to talk about using the Lore Masters deck as just like a cool way, like on a night where you're just enjoying a glass of wine or just chilling out with family. Because a lot of times when we talk about games, we think that there's like an end goal or it's a competitive nature. But when we were demoing the deck to Eric's family, out of all people, just to kind of like talk to them about the product, they were just getting super excited. They were like, ooh, like I can just do this and I can just do this. And then his mom was saying, oh, well, I have friends who are retired and I think this is just something that they could just put together and just have fun playing it throughout like the night and just feel inspired without feeling any sort of pressure to perform or do something or complete something.
Yeah. I think it being an open-ended activity where you can find what you bring to it, or leave with what you want from it is something that's really exciting.
Yeah.
And we have lots of votes for monsters. I think we're doing monster. But a question for you, Maroki: did you have fun with your first D&D session?
Oh, yes, I think is like the overarching answer. I did find it very stressful at the beginning. I definitely like am a rules advisor kind of person, and I don't want to make a fool of myself being like, I don't know what to roll. I'm not rolling the wrong thing. Am I interrupting? Am I do like like I want to do things correctly. I definitely am that perfectionist type. So I was doing something that was completely out of my comfort zone by airing my dirty laundry for the world to see, so to say, by doing it all wrong. But I think I really grew incredibly invested in the characters too, and there was definitely moments when things were like, I mean, I think it was very obvious when things were not going the right way for certain characters with Phaedriel that I was like,
your boyfriend, or sorry, your gender
what?
neutral, your them friend, your paramour.
My them friend. What are you talking about? Not my them friend at all. Not the crush that Nom secretly was fostering throughout the thing. But I was definitely having moments. Like I was so invested in the characters, and the fascinating thing with oh, quiet, Terry. You weren't supposed to air that for everyone.
Nat one on Nom's first roll.
Yeah. I need to get that out of the way, right? Jazz was doing some like nat 20s and I was nat 1ing. But anywho, the long and short, Tom, is that I did enjoy it very much at the end. I was surprised by how invested I got in all the characters. And on one hand, it's like wonderful to see these characters organically. It's organic, right? Because everyone's role playing them and we all choose different directions. On the other hand, it's incredibly frustrating because, like real life, sometimes things do not go the way we want them to. And I'm like, how dare you not go in the direction that I wanted you to go?
Yeah, and D&D is very much learning to lean into the swerve, right? Like the way you get out of the skid is you steer into the direction of the skid, and that's very much in D&D. Like if we're going this way, we may as well choose to be going this way and see what happens. Yeah, wonderful. I'm just so glad you shared that. I'm realizing we only have half an hour left, so I'm gonna make some quick choices to get some more stuff on the field here. I pulled a card where I have an instant idea and I know exactly what I want to do, so I'm gonna skip the democratic process. Songbird. I love the idea that this tree that is like at the heart of the nation that they are tasked with taking care of is like it's this big ancient tree, and it is the habitat of like this one songbird that sings the song that ends the world. So the agenda, I'm going to say, belongs to some people in the country, but not all. So there's like a group that wants the tree to die because it'll make the bird leave and sing and end the world. And there's like a group of them that have this like kind of rapture apocalypse mindset. And then there's another group that's like, no, keep the tree healthy. And the embarrassing scandal is maybe not that the tree died outright, but that like someone almost killed the tree. Like rather than watering it, they like poured the thing that it's allergic to or something, or made a big mistake. And it became the moment where like the bird almost left, but didn't. But I kind of like the idea of like this songbird that sings the song that ends the world. And if it should ever take flight, that it will begin the song that is the end. I just think that would be really a very cool thing. So that's me grabbing a quick one. Moroki, this next one is all you. Do you want to pick the event, or do you want to pick the faction that we need to pull to complete these prompts here? So the embarrassing scandal associated with our bonsai country, our tree country, or the agenda to defeat another faction for our tree country? Which one do you want to pick?
It's like I want to pick the scandal, but I also like the idea of symbolizing another faction. So let's pick the faction.
Faction. Awesome. All right. So this calls all you. Are they trying to defeat a monastery, a unit, a court, or a people? Oh, that's interesting. It's really interesting. People versus country. Like, what does it mean to be a people but not a country? Is a really
it suddenly became like there's that very totalitarian element of like this country. It's always interesting when you think like when you start and I naturally always assume like my first things that I pick are good guys, and I'm like, ooh, the faction, this country of bonsais is like a good guy, and then I'm like, now they're trying to defeat a people, and that sounds like a very bad guy thing to do. Let's go with people.
Okay. And then chat, this one's going to be you. We are going to decide what the scandal is. We're going to draw an event card here. Is the scandal a birth, a tempest, a wedding, or a toppling? Birth, tempest, wedding, toppling.
The toppling is like the toppling of the tree.
Oh. Yeah.
That's me trying to bias the opinions of the votes.
Or like a tempest where like the tree almost got washed away or something.
Oh yeah.
Or actually vote for birth. And that makes me think like if there was like a seedling or something, or like the embarrassing scandal, someone took a seedling and like planted it somewhere else, and now another country has the same tree that's supposed to be iconic of the first country. These are all really good. I'm seeing 2 votes for toppling, so I think we'll go with toppling. And that can still be tied to whatever hapless gardener accidentally ruined everything for everyone. Awesome. Okay, so I don't think I want to know more about the songbird. I think I've already got a good idea of what's going on there. That was my little pitch, and it feels very like finished in my mind. But let's learn about this other people. Let's do them. So I'm going to scooch this whole thing down a little bit. Oh, the other thought that I had was the other thing on that month, the creature card was a corvid. And I liked the idea of like a magpie that will go steal the moon or something that will like change the way that the sky looks. Was another sort of fun thought I had. All right.
Peter has a lot of ideas, folks. His mind works in a very interesting way that I'm very inspired by.
I can't stop it. It just keeps happening. May as well have fun with it. All right. Here we go. We get to pick another emblem. So we have what looks to me like a stag and or Nom, Moroki's character, who has antlers. We have what could be a chess piece or a tower. We have very abstract symbol. I'll hold it up nice and close for you. It looks like moons or crescent moons or orbits, perhaps. We have, I don't know what to call that. We'll call it Beats by Dre. We have a hand with 2 fingers. We have, let's call this one landscape. I think it looks to me like it's a sun setting over an ocean, perhaps with a figure in front of it or a plinth in front of it. We have what could be a flower or star or sun or burst. And then we have, we'll call this one rune, just rune, I think, for short. Could be an upside down H, could be like a weapon, like a halberd. Yeah, got a lot of options there.
And as people are voting, we actually have a question from Tara asking how well did the symbols deck work with the other cards like creature or mineral? And actually, this is a good question because this is something I had a conversation with Peter about. So Peter, why don't you give your answer first? And because I actually don't know whether you decided to move one way or another based on our conversation.
So originally I was going to, in the guidebook for this, suggest ways that the symbols might connect to those things. So it does connect with all of them, but my primary focus was on using these to connect with factions, figures, events, locations, and then objects were like, there were things where like I would say like, you know, it's inscribed on the object, or it is a visual at the location. Oh yeah, across the other side, just as a reminder there. So Yeah, so that was originally what I was doing, and I was trying to think very literally of how this symbol exists in the world. But like someone thought of the symbol and carved it into something, or painted it on something, or wrote it onto something. And then Maruki came back with a suggestion that like, well, why does it have to be literal? That there are a lot of different ways that symbols might connect to something, and that's where we started talking about, okay, well, what if we don't literally use the chess piece tower, but the idea of something that is like a singular looming figure, or that stands up and stands out, and that like puts itself in front. And so the image of this people is that of like taking a stand, and that's what we take away from that image. Or from this symbol here, what if it's just more about like orbits, the idea of things that orbit, or of astrology or astronomy and the movement of bodies. And so when you start combining this with, say, like creatures, you could do something where there's markings on a creature that are attached to this. You could do something where, yeah, so you might have like a starburst marking that appears on a creature that it's like, rather than having stripes, it has like a radial kind of marking. You could do something where the shape of its antler or the shape of a part of its body follows the shape of a symbol. You could do something where the creature has hands. You could do something where that's the habitat of it. It's basically any way that you want to connect it. For materials, for example, these could be textures that appear in the material. This might inspire a property attached to astronomy or astrology. The idea is basically that words are so definitive in what they mean. Symbols are much more abstract, and any way that you find meaning that connects to the prompt is valid. It's the way to go. And there's going to be suggestions in the guidebook for how to facilitate that process. I feel like I stole the explanation there, Maruki. Is there anything that you want to add about like other ways that you see using this or getting to play with it?
No, not really. I think you more or less highlighted it. I remember one of the things that we discussed originally when you wanted to include the emblems and symbols in the guidebook, you actually wanted to exclude attaching the card to certain decks from the lore masters deck. And I think like for me, I immediately was like, I love structure, and I definitely wanted to kind of ensure that we had a sort of like the basic rule set or guide set. I don't want to say rule set, but the basic guide set of how we can use the deck and all the ways we can break the rules. But actually, in this kit situation, I think it's better if we say the emblems is can qualify any of those decks, as opposed to saying that it only should qualify for some of those decks. I think finally too, like just to reiterate how having a visual element is a really good way to sort of break up your way of thinking, right? Similarly to how the Lore Masters deck is a really good, when you get words, they actually allow me to expand my vocabulary outside of like what I'm usually all thinking about or caught up in thinking. I know for me, when I'm writing song lyrics, I'll use the word, like the word fire or freedom over and over and over again across different songs because I get locked into it. Similarly, using emblems and symbols could be a way when you are trying to create something in your mind and you're locked in, like as you said, something in the words which are quite definitive. The symbols could change the way you're thinking. So where I feel like we have like a lot
We have
of
a
votes.
five-way tie, I think.
Yeah, five-way tie right now. Someone break the tie. Someone break the tie.
Well, actually, I'm going to go ahead and take Thomas's suggestion here a little bit and actually just showcase one of the things that I like about the deck, which is that you can change your choices. So I had that alternate pitch about using a corvid, and a rook is another word for a raven. So we could just straight up go and take this chess piece, decide that rather than it being a king or anything, that it's a rook or tower. And like, I think towers are sometimes called, like rookeries are often located in towers, and it's one of the ways that those words are potentially related. I'm gonna go ahead and just rotate this. I'm gonna change
I
that.
like how Tara is very like adamant, like stag/nom, stag/nom.
Yeah, I love that this
I
becomes the nom
appreciate
symbol.
I appreciate the loyalty.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, I'm gonna say like we have the people. Oh, or there's the two songbirds, and that's the competition between the country and the people. That the tree country has the songbird associated with them, and we could even like when we're doing their flag, you could add a bird. If you're going to draw it out, you could add a bird to the flag that's up in the tree. That's a detail that some people know about the lore of this country. So we could keep the rook, we could keep the songbird, and then have the rook people. Oh, and there's things like they want to steal, like steal the bird from the tree, or there's some kind of like a sneakiness or a thieving that's involved in what they're planning to do as their way of like fighting back against the country. And it's these two like bird nations at war. I think that is really fun. Cool. I love this. Okay. So we've got our rook there, and let's go ahead and pick some secondary prompts. So this the people of the rook have a background where they are known for publishing an historical text or book. They have an agenda where they want to gain a monopoly over a material resource. They have a trait where they have a celebrity or cultish leader. Or they have a trait where they have a large spy or intelligence network. So you can go ahead and vote for historical text, monopoly, leader, or spy. I appreciate the support for Rook versus Songbird.
I kind of dig the cultish leader, or monopoly over a resource, because I'm wondering if there's like some sort of tie-in to the tree. Like it's like I don't know. My brain stopped there, but I'm feeling the wisps of something possibly connecting. Like we need like one more thing. It's like if we find out what that resource is, it's like that's when you start seeing all the the connections between everything else.
They are so the votes are coming in for leader, but we can do this with a corner tuck. So let's
corner tucks.
Yeah, corner tucks are the nice way to keep everyone's happy when we do a corner tuck. Okay.
We are returning to a democracy or something.
It's almost like. All right, so Maroki, you pick the material, and then chat, you're going to pick the leader. So I'll show you the leader first. Vote. The chat can vote, and then Maroki, while they're voting, you go ahead and pick our leader. Or so you go ahead and pick our material. So chat, please vote on, is the celebrity or cultish leader a pedant, which is to say someone who's like very, I was gonna say pedantic, which doesn't really help clarify, who is like very like facts and details based, corrects others, very literal minded, but also detail oriented? Are they a sentinel, which is to say someone who watches or guards? Are they an instructor, or are they a beekeeper? I mean, why not? Why not have them be a beekeeper? Yeah. We'll get votes for pedant, sentinel, instructor, or beekeeper. And while you are voting, I'll leave that visible right here. While you are voting, we will have Maroki pick our material. Here we go. Maroki, are they trying to gain a monopoly over a sugar, a fiber, a type of gravel, or a type of glass?
Great, they want to gain a monopoly over it.
Kind of like fibers for nesting, but I also sugar's just fun. Like I just want to know more about why they're.
Well, like with sugar, it's like if maybe the sugar is like is a kind of food for the rook. Like I know rooks don't eat sugar, but hummingbirds do. So I can see like if they have the symbol and if they're thieving, maybe they want to like own this resources, because maybe all the different factions and peoples are represented by birds around the world, and sugar is like a really valuable resource because like birds eat or at least hummingbirds eat sugar, so I'm sure other birds would eat sugar even if it might kill them. But let's just assume they eat sugar, and sugar is extremely valuable as a resource or like a food source for them.
And you're getting support from the chat. People are saying they will change their votes to beekeeper if sugar wins. And I think it's a great idea. So let's do sugar, or we can think of it as honey or a syrup of some kind. And then the celebrity or cultish leader is the beekeeper, who, are we able to see that? No, not just the shadow is making it a little bit hard to see there. But we have our little beekeeper up at the top there. Amazing. So we've got sugar and beekeeper. We have this sort of syrupy thing going on for the rook people who are opposing the songbird people. I love it. And we are going to finish off this faction, and then we can decide if we want to do a symbol for the beekeeper or a symbol for the sugar, however we want to do this. But let's go ahead and pick between. They have a background where they caused another faction's downfall. We can pull a third faction in here. An agenda to accumulate secrets or intelligence, which is so good for a rook, a raven, a corvid, a magpie-based nation. They have a notable headquarters, which would actually I thought would also be a lot of fun to find out and to see a location card with a symbol. Or they are prone to extremism, which is often the case with sort of cultishly structured organizations. So You can vote for extremism, downfall, secrets, or headquarters, or just HQ for short. Any of these interesting to you, Maruki?
See, if we cause another faction's downfall, this is when we can like build out the lore of birds and create another faction and attach another birdie-like emblem to them. That being said, Thomas's suggestion of a notable headquarters and kind of insinuating that it's a beehive is actually kind of cool. And it's interesting that the leader is like a beekeeper if it's a people that sort of represents a rook. Although that being said, this is where the rook where the rook symbol could have a double entendre because it's like they could like that could represent their headquarters as well. So it's like a double symbol. It's like it could represent both maybe that this people like are really like have this kind of really unique fortress that's created by this cultish leader, but it also symbolizes birds in some ways. It symbolizes like the rook at the same time.
Yeah, I really like that. This is one of those things where, like, if there's loose ends while you're starting the prompt, you can figure out what that means in the writing. I love a beehive tower. I think that's such a cool image. I think like the honeycomb tower would be really cool, and also just the scene of like trying to navigate it, and there's all these like passageways that fold back on each other and fold back on themselves would be really neat. And I can imagine the birds and the bees like flying out of it, emerging. There's
oh my god, is like part of the scandal actually more like there was like some sort of romance between these two factions because it's like the birds and the bees and anyway.
Or maybe they shared their magics with each other and it was a hex scandal.
Oh no.
Okay. And I'm not going to bother pulling. I'm not going to bother pulling a card for the notable headquarters because I think we know we like our beehive tower. We've got our answer there. We don't really need to pull anything else out to make that work. So let's get experimental here. Let's look at if you could vote in the chat for either the toppling, the sugar, or the beekeeper. We'll pull one of these out and we'll try a material card with it and see what happens. So vote for toppling, sugar, or beekeeper.
I'm also wanting to find like more opportunities to pull out more emblems and attach them to things because I definitely think like that this is like the perfect I mean, this is literally an emblems demo, so let's just attach emblems to everything. In fact, there's like something interesting if we attach like an emblem to something like sugar, like okay, this is me pitching to you folks here. I like how people are voting on sugar because we're used to attaching symbols to things that are I guess like in my mind obvious, to buildings, to people. Like, you know, we know they can, you know, people can wear like a faction or symbol on their chest, but like how do you attach an emblem to sugar, right? Like what does that mean? And I'm curious to know what that means because it's like, is it, yeah, it's like as I was gonna say, like, is it the logo because they're trying to gain a monopoly of the resource, so like the branding could represent it, and if the emblem or symbol is very, I guess, like evil looking, it can kind of show like that they control absolutely everything about that resource, or insinuates kind of like the villainy of a people for wanting to control that resource. Or maybe the symbol is more representative of like the minerality that defines that particular sugar. Like maybe that sugar comes exclusively from a plant. Maybe it's coming from the freaking bonsai tree of the other faction, right?
That's how it's pollinated. They actually need each other, these nations. Oh, this is so good. This is so good. Okay, well let's find out. Let's get our symbol here going. So this is the symbol for sugar, which was definitely the leading vote there. Okay, so this sugar, again, these can mean anything. We have a sheep.
Sheep.
We have a tent. We have a freaky eye. We have
that backwards H again.
Yeah, backwards thing. H. We have a monarch and followers, it looks like. We have grain, it looks like, or these could be like big like palm leaves.
Or sugarcane.
Oh yeah, or sugarcane, yeah. We have interlinked triangles. And then we have, we'll call this one the glyph. We have a glyph. It looks almost to me like a little camp being made.
Yeah.
So lots of ways that we can use this. Like honey is actually made using materials. So we could like have this be the thing that the honey's made from. and that could sort of inspire like how the sugar is harvested. It could be like, what does the sugar come in, like a lattice cube form, or like maybe the way that it forms isn't square like sugar.
Mhm.
Like we often experience sugar, but it like starts to form in these like interlinked triangle lattices. Um, the thing that I get when I see this style is just kind of like almost this calligraphic look, and I like the idea that like the sugar could be used. There's like a bunch of different types of like mancies, of like types of magic or future prediction that we have in our own world for like predicting the future with tea leaves, or by like, I don't know, cutting onions or something. So I like the idea that like the patterns that form naturally in the sugar when sugar hardens is like a way of telling the future. That's something about the symbol that makes me think about that. Um, the other thing that's kind of neat is if it's like royal sugar, or like a royal honey or a royal syrup, it makes sense why the beekeeper is like the cultish leader of this people that is hoarding it, because it is like literally a source of power. Um, I have no ideas for the sheep, to be perfectly honest, none whatsoever. The tent could be like how the sugar is like made, or like the area where it's processed. Oh, the other one that I really like, I like the eye of like the sugar, like just straight up gives you visions, or like gives you like galaxy brain, galaxy eye, where like you suddenly see the world in a different way. Um, and then yeah, this one again makes me think about like kind of like this symbol. It makes me think about telling the future, or like having runes or lines appear in the sugar when it hardens or dries that you use to read it, to read the future. Any of these striking you, Moroki?
I don't know. I think I got so locked into the idea of where it's like harvested from. Although, yeah, what Maureen was saying is like tablet medicine and printing a logo is fascinating to me, because it's like, when you think about how people are trying to exploit a resource and they claim it for themselves, and it's like a really good way to claim it for themselves, and it also makes the sugar seem a lot more like an illegal drug that you're trying to shuttle across from each other, or it has a lot more nefarious energy than just being like, here's some sugar, it's sweet, right? It's kind of being seen in this very like chemical compound element to it, and you could
Yeah,
almost stamp that into like, and maybe to tie in Tara's suggestion of the space triangle, you can have these like sugars and you're stamping the space triangle on it. It has very like evil scientist lab energy.
but also like symbol of unity too, right? Of like these three things bound together by the sticky substance. Oh, gosh, I'm having trouble picking this. There's so many different ways to do it. Um, okay, well, let's do the triangle, and I do like this pitch that like the one of the ways that the sugar is controlled is that it is stamped, so like that it was like harvested officially, and the stamp is a really important way of marking that sugar. Um, oh, and then if you have a storyline where like a character wants to like contaminate the sugar to like poison the royalty, um, they need to like get a hold of a copy of the stamp, or like counterfeit it so they can make this fake sugar. It'd be like a really fun thing. Also, I do like the idea that in my mind, probably because of my own gender assumptions, I've been imagining the beekeeper as male, and I often will think of characters male first, and then have to think about like, how do I not make everyone just look like me, or come from my background or experience. Love the beekeeper being a queen bee. I just think it's a really cool idea. I saw also that like monarch figure as being a king, but it makes so much more sense that there would be like a queen, and this is like, again, this queen bee who rules this roost. I think that's great. So we only have a few minutes left on this stream, because Moroki, I know that you need to go, and I do want to have a chance to show the Nat 20 image. So I think let's leave the sugar there, because I think we also have we had so many ideas we could still use. We could still attach it to the idea that it's like that it's a symbol of the queen bee, that it has hallucinogenic properties. I think let's do one more quick one with let's vote for location or object in the chat. We'll do an image attached to location or object, and we will go from there. We'll do like one little attachment to just try that out, and then I will show you the screenshot. That would be lovely. So yeah, go ahead and vote for object or location.
Remind me where the location is being linked to again.
Nowhere. We're just going to straight up pull one, and we'll figure out how it connects to the world as we go.
That's fair. 2 locations, 1 object. Tara's asking, can we build on this world like a part 2 in the next one? I mean, isn't that always the case? I always feel like we build these like really cool little worlds and then we immediately toss them aside and do another one. And Tara, unless Peter has other thoughts, I don't want to burst your bubble because I am attached to this world too, like all the other worlds we've created. In fact, I feel like the world of Rhymeway I have such a personal attachment to, and I'm really sad that that one shot has ended. I feel like there's going to be already so many other things built for Rhymeway. We probably will let this world go and build a new one next time, just for the sake of being able to also like properly showcase all the different cool things we want to show in our different expansions. Let's, you know, for deities, for namesakes. Not and like again, and this also gives us a chance to just constantly like show more of the deck. This is like completely selfish of us. Obviously, like we want to be able to showcase the campaign and showcase all the amazing things that Lore Master's deck can do. So as a result, we want to constantly show like cool new things, but that doesn't necessarily mean, look, this live stream is existing on demand afterwards. Like, I don't know, co-op the world for yourself, and we'd be excited to see what you like, what kind of little spins that you can take these stories for. We've already created like, I don't know, 3 different lore like we've already, through all our conversations over this last 90 minutes, I feel like we've created like 4 possible lore backstories for this part, for this prompt alone. So, you know, like the opportunities are endless there. So okay, we started with locations, and I feel like the object kind of came and
yeah, you're right. Objects took it. I had pulled a location, but the people have spoken. Here we go. Bam. So is our object that we're going to do here a harpoon, a flute, a cuirass, which is like a piece of armor. I believe it's very breastplatey, but also with a back section, or a stimulant.
See, the stimulant is like tied in with sugar.
And like, yeah, we could just decide, even without the cards prompting it directly, that there is a connection between those things, that the sugar is a component in it.
Yeah, and as the votes are coming in, Maureen's saying what would be awesome, just write down the prompts and compile them into a PDF. It's almost like you may be like having premonitions over some of the stretch goals that we have in the future or something, Maureen. Just teasing that out there.
Flute, 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 flute. All flutes. We're all flute here.
We all like the flute. Like the magic flute. Mozart magic flute.
Love it. Let's give it some symbol inspiration. Okay, so we have 2 hands holding what could be, let's get in focus there, what could be a flower or a disc. We have a landscape or sunset. We have, I really like this one. Zach found this image and it makes me think of when you do like brackets of like things that are in competition with each other, and you're like to see like who gets to the finals or whatever. It reminds me of that kind of diagram. I'm gonna call this guy Upside Down Snowman. And on the back side, we have a little octopus, baby. We have a mortar and pestle, but it could also be like a cannon or like an artillery thing. We have what is obviously a Beyblade.
I was gonna be like, it's fully Beyblade, isn't it?
Or a vortex, we can call it. And then we have, oh, I like this one. It looks like a backwards E or like an exploding ampersand. Or it just feels like a bit of magic scrawl, like in like a wizard's notebook. Oh, or it's like a clef for the tonal range that this flute plays in. That's not normal. It's like not standard.
Right. I like how Eric interpreted it as an ear, which I guess ties in with flute.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and as people are voting, Fellowship of the Tables is asking whether you find yourself interpreting the symbols very differently each time you see them.
Yeah, because I almost always that lens of that first card already changes what I'm primed to see. So especially with the more ambiguous, I mean, like this will always be a Beyblade to me, not gonna lie, but I definitely like, I will take different things away and I'll be primed for different things. So like our little octopus friend here, who only has 6 legs, I noticed, which could be a thing that you take literally or figuratively, makes me think about, like, specifically in the context of a flute, is like, what if there was a flute that required you to have more than 2 hands to play it? that was designed for a very specific species to play that requires the extra hands. The Mortar Pestle makes me think about like, what if I decide it's not a flute and it's more like a pipe for smoking, or like you grind up like a tobacco, or you grind up something that goes inside it. Actually the ear, it just didn't occur to me until Eric said ear, but the ear makes me think about it's a little bit gross because now I'm imagining earwax on a flute, but what if it's a device that you put it in your ear and you play it to modulate what you're hearing, right? So you can like change the frequency.
I was just thinking more like the ear, because like the flute played like a really specific frequency or impacted the human experience in a certain way. But do go on, Peter. Just like think about shoving the flute inside that ear.
Here's my pitch. We think about like with instruments, right? We think about how you play, you manipulate the sound as it comes out. What if there's an instrument where you manipulate sound as it comes in? So you can change what you hear into a symphony, or you can filter or tune what you hear to like focus on certain frequencies. I think it'd be really cool if there's like a flute that you play into your ear so that it changes the sound that's coming in. I don't know what it means, but the idea tickles me because it's like a backwards flute basically.
Well, as we roll towards the end of the stream, I'm hearing one vote for octopus, and Thomas is saying sextopus, and I'm not sure if that's your vote, Thomas, or if that's you actually just wanting to share with us the name of the new octopus, or we can just
like this one too. Vortex is the flute plays. I'm going to leave this one open. I don't think we have to decide this one. Like, I like that there's a bunch of different paths, and I like that everyone has a different take that they can carry away with this. And that's kind of what the whole theme of the symbols deck is, right? Is like symbols are containers for meaning, and you bring that meaning. And I like how many different ways we can do this. So this was a delight. Thank you so much for coming to watch me melt in the sunlight and also debut the Emblems expansion. This was been a delight to develop. Special shout out to Zach, who worked especially hard on getting this one ready for the stream. Zach Schuster, who does a lot of the graphic design with me, just really phenomenal. So thank you to Zach. And I will end off by showing you the screenshot. And Maroki, if at any point you have to hop out, don't worry. You're welcome to leave, because I know you have a timeline today. But yeah, so we're heading into the boss fight. We are deep under Skycrown Glacier, heading into a secret location at the depths of it called the Hearth of the World. The CEO of Biotactica Foundation, this big bad evil guy who we've been hearing about since the beginning of the campaign, is about to fire up the Hearth of the World and potentially do some really horrible things that could change the future of the glacier and the entire world of Rhymeway. And I am ready with, like, I've got his hit points piled up. I've got all the goons ready to go. The party rolls really good on initiative and combat. My wife rolls second, but our first player who would have gone first decides to delay their turn. And my wife, Jasmine, who, again, like I wasn't sure if she'd want to play and join this. She came as a player and brought so much energy and humor and enthusiasm. But she was very much like a guest on my debut live stream, where I'm like, I really want this to go well. I need the plan to go according to. And she rolls nat 20 on, not even on the first roll. She missed and realized that she had advantage on that attack and corrected me and got the second roll on it. Hit the nat 20, and this is the exact moment of our screens side by side on the replay. As she hit that nat 20, and I realized that this combat was going to go very differently than I had been expecting. All right, here we go.
So brilliant. I didn't even notice it happening, but there was so much happening, and I'm sure we were all rolling or freaking out in our moment. So the fact that you saw this,
I didn't notice it happening either. It was a friend of ours who was watching along with us, who like said to me later, like, the look that you gave when Jasmine had that first round of combat was like, I definitely see it as like that every man should look at his wife with a combination of like, I am so impressed, I'm so happy for you, you are incredible. Also, I'm a little bit afraid. Also, I'm like 10% afraid of your vast and unstoppable capabilities. But this was the nat 20 moment. There were some really great nat 20s. Not long after this, Alina rolled a nat 20 on a persuasion check that could possibly have changed the fate of all of Rhymeway. Truly a moment that, and this was the moment that like actually changed what Jordan thought was going to happen with their character Phaedriel. Completely changed because of this role and because of Alina's like amazing role play delivery. And there's literally a moment, and there's so many good timestamps. I had to come up with the chapters for this 4.5 hour session. So like, what were the highlight moments that also indicate the flow of the story? Nam having a chess master galaxy brain moment is one of those timestamps that I really love. It's a good one to tune into. This one was really great, but yeah, there's literally one that's called like one dice roll to determine the fate of the world, because it did come down to that at the end of the session. One dice roll to determine the fate of the world. Such a thrilling, fun campaign. I do hope we have a chance to check it out. Again, if you click through to the Story Engine's YouTube channel and go to the live section, you'll find the replay there. You can also sign up to be notified for all of our future live streams, including we will be doing Deities on Tuesday, the Deities expansion. We will be doing Namesakes on Wednesday, the Namesakes expansion. We'll be doing the Bridge expansions on Friday to show you, and all of them are going to be a hoot and a holler. So I guess,
Yeah.
Roki, can you send us out with a telling people what they can do if they want to help Lore Master's deck?
Absolutely. Well, we're 2 weeks left. We have exactly 14 days left in the campaign. So we're right in that mid-game, folks. It reminds me of some of these like old Western novels that I used to read where like they have to go horse racing, but they're racing for like days. And you know, in that middle ground, you're like buckling in and you're like, okay, well now my horse just needs to survive across the desert, and I just need to like be really chill with the fact that we're not moving at the same pace, but I have to make sure I survive so that in that like the final hour, my horse has enough water and enough energy to race across the finish line, and just like strategizing. This is Nom doing her chess strategizing, right? It's like the middle game where it's a little bit boring and you're only taking like you're doing a move, but all you're doing is moving your bishop like one square, as opposed to like being like, I'm gonna sweep like 6 squares across the screen and like kill the thing. You're like, no, I'm literally just gonna move one square, but that one square will determine the fate of the entire chess game. This is where we are at now. So you know, we love that you guys are continuing to join us for the live streams. If you know other people who are interested in the deck and maybe they have questions, joining the streams is a really great way for us to answer all your burning questions and share a little bit more about the deck, because it's a beast and we want to give it all to you. So share a good word if you guys haven't yet. You know, obviously we're on all the socials: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We downloaded Threads today, so you know, we're like early adapters or something. Find us on all the social media. Drop questions in the community forum if you guys have questions for us. Share the campaign. If you guys are signed up for our newsletters and our updates, even if you want to just forward that to friends and family who may be interested, it really does truly mean all the world to us. So take a moment, check us out, storyenginedeck.com/lore, or I'm sure if you've even Googled it, Lore Masters deck in the Google lands and backer kit, because obviously we are on backer kit this time, and please take a moment to find and check us out. So Peter, I don't know if you want to send us out like officially with the pitch video, or if we want to just sign off this time. I'll leave that final sign out in your hands.
I almost crashed our stream last time I played the pitch video. So today I'm gonna say not today. Yeah, last time I almost.
That's all good. It's Friday. We should
Um,
all be going off and enjoying, I don't know, sunshine or snow, depending on where you are in the world. Some of you might be sleeping if you're joining us late, but yes.
But I will send people off with keep an eye out for the next project update, because it's going to be a banger. New add-ons, new stretch goals, some really exciting things that we could be adding to the deck if we manage to keep that funding moving. So definitely check it out. I would say it's probably gonna be our biggest update between now and the end of the campaign in terms of like new content to check out. And we are going to show you the storage box. I've been internally calling it the Leviathan box, and I would like to. I'm going to ask Maroki for approval on that name before we publish it. But yeah, a lot coming. So keep an eye out for the updates, because it's going to be a biggie. But we'll say have a wonderful evening. Have a happy Friday. We'll see you all on Tuesday for Deities. And thank you so much for creating with us today.
See you.